you. So once again, for those logging in now, my name is Federico Menino, and I'm an admissions officer at Schwarzman Scholars. And I'll be facilitating today's webinar, which is part of a featured spotlight series in which we showcase particular elements of the Schwarzman Scholars program. Today, we will be focusing on the deep dive course. As you will hear from Chad, who is here with us in a couple of minutes, the deep dive is one of the most distinctive components of the Schwarzman Scholars curriculum and overall student experience. More than a required course or a mandatory step to obtain a master's degree at Schwarzman College, the deep dive is an intrinsic part of the mission and the vision inspiring Schwarzman Scholars since its inception. And to talk about the deep dive in more detail, we could not have a better guest than we have today. Joining us from China is the one and only Chad Futrell. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Federico.
Cool. Let me give you a quick introduction about Chad. So Chad is the executive director of student life at Schwarzman College, where he oversees a number of academic and extracurricular initiatives, including the deep dive program. Chad joined Schwarzman Scholars 5 years ago today. Is that correct, Chad? So another reason to celebrate in addition to Cinco de Mayo and we being all here together. And only a few months, when Chad joined, it was only a few months before the first cohort of scholars arrived at the college. So he has been in China for over 15 years now, and he previously ran and taught at study abroad programs at Peking University and other universities in Beijing. Before that, Chad spent around a decade connecting environmental NGOs in China and South Korea. Chad obtained his undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and did his subsequent graduate work at Cornell University. He was also Fulbright, Hayes, and Korea Foundation Fellow at Tsinghua University and in Korea. So long curriculum there. And I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Chad is the father. I would call him the godfather or the grandfather, but I want to be respectful to this. He's the godfather of the deep dive program. Also with us today, I just want, if you guys can show your beautiful faces on the screen just for a second so that people can see you. Joining with us today is an outstanding lineup of alumni of the program, representing the third cohort of Schwarzman Scholars. We have Fan Pan from China and Willie Thompson and from the United States. And representing the class of 2020, we have Carlos Rodriguez and Shubing Li. Later on, they will talk to us about their incredible personal trajectories and their unique deep dive experiences in different parts of China. So thank you all very much for joining us, alumni, Chad, and especially the attendees who join us today. And without further ado, I just want to pass the word to Chad. Chad, please illuminate us with your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much, Federico, for that introduction, and just welcome to everyone around the world. Obviously, today I get to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about, which is our deep dive program. I'm just going to start sharing screen, and so with that, so I think one of the things I really think that deep dive is indicative of is how much our program has evolved over the last 5 years. As Federico mentioned, today is my 5th anniversary with Schwarzman Scholars, and coming here for me was literally a life-changing event, and it's something that I'm just forever thankful for. But deep dive in that first year, when we first launched, it was really just a 1-week trip to a part of China. We knew that we wanted our students, we wanted our scholars to understand China from a variety of ways, not just from courses. And so in order to understand China, you've got to see China. So in the first year, we went to 3 different cities. We went to Suzhou, along with Baoji and Xi'an. And then, but over time, we realized it needed to evolve. And so the course has really expanded out over the last few years. Now it's a 2-credit course that runs the entirety of the year. And one of the first ways that it expanded was we realized that our students, our scholars, when they were going around to these different companies and meeting with government officials, they realized that they needed kind of a crash course in Chinese etiquette. And so we started giving lectures on, say, how to conduct yourself in a business meeting, how do you greet people, how do you operate in, say, a banquet. And then we realized, oh well, because the deep dive, the field trip, happened so early in the year, some of our students, because a lot of our scholars did not have a background in China before joining the program. And so we said, oh, well, they also need some basics in Chinese history. They need some basics in Chinese culture. And so we started doing these lectures. We added lectures and then kind of walking lectures around Beijing. And so as soon as the scholars arrive, in the very first weeks, we take them to the Forbidden City, and we talk about Chinese politics. We take them to the Summer Palace to talk about the Opium War. And so these are almost kind of walking lectures. We learn about Buddhism and Confucianism through visiting the Confucius and Lama temples. And then the lecture series has really expanded out over the years. So the lectures cover a variety of topics, and they're basically kind of a graduate level introductory lectures. I give some of the lectures, but I also invite the best people I can think of to give different talks. And some of these are professors, some are faculty. We've had our, say, history talks by history faculty from Harvard who are also in teaching other courses. Or we've also, a lot of times we actually have practitioners. So this past year, we've had people from the World Economic Forum, the Stimson Institute, Merrick's Global Institute on China Studies, the best kind of China think tank in Europe. We had entrepreneurs talking about how they started their businesses, just a variety of topics. And we try to have a lot of diversity. This is another one of the key touchstones is, we're not a US-China program, we're a China and the world program, a global program. So this year we had speakers from six countries, just for the deep dive series alone. But of course, the highlight of the deep dive program is the week-long field trip in between modules 1 and 2. Now, these field trips, they are led by faculty, usually faculty from Tsinghua, from the business school of economics and management, or the public policy school. And traditionally, we've had 4 kinds of field trips. One would be social or state-led development trip. I think Willie went on one of those. The second is most common would be the business development trip, and then I think Fang went on. And then last year we added rural development, which Carlos went on, and then probably the most unique one is political shadowing, and I'll come to that in a little bit. These are just these are locations we've been to in the past, and so you can see we've had a lot of business development trips and social development trips, and we're adding more and more. But it kind of gives you a sense of it, and so there's variety. We've had Shizhuazhuang, Hangzhou, Suzhou, Xiamen, Shenzhen, Chengdu, Baoji, Xi'an, and Yunnan. So we've had field trips all over China. And this is one of the things that we really want. We want to give students the variety and the opportunity to explore different parts of China, not just Beijing and Shanghai. We've actually never done a field trip to Shanghai because students can go to Shanghai on their own, but they're not going to go to Shizhuazhuang on their own. Shizhuazhuang, you probably never heard of it. It's a city of 11 million people, the same size as LA. Baoji, another city you've probably never heard of, 4 million people. That, obviously a massive city, not massive by Chinese standards, but by usual standards. And so to give that diversity. But to give you an idea, I mean, this is the Shenzhen business development trip is maybe kind of indicative of a business-oriented deep dive field trip. These are some of the companies we've gone to in the past. Shenzhen is kind of known as the Silicon Valley of hardware. I mean, this is one of the most innovative places in the world. And that's why you have things like the HAX incubator, which is a hardware incubator. And the reason it's located in Shenzhen, it's located really just above the Huaqiaobei electronics space. This is where, so people they're say prototyping something and they need this little part. Well, they just go downstairs and they can find anything. You're building, a new toaster oven or a new AI enabled whatever, and you need a prototype, and you want to prototype something. In America, it would take say 3 months. At HAX in Huaqiaobei, it takes about 3 weeks, sometimes 3 days, because they're located right there. And Tencent, if you've ever heard, most people have heard of Alibaba. Well, Tencent is just as big and is ubiquitous in China. Tencent through WeChat is what it's most known for. Lala Move, a company that didn't exist 5-6 years ago and now is one of the top companies in the world in terms of logistics. The drone company DJI, I think you've heard of. Beijing Genomics, they control basically a third of all the genome, along with Europe and America. This is where just amazing company. Another one would be the social and state-led development trips, and here I'm going to highlight Baoji for a second. So Baoji we've been going to from the beginning, and it's a city where again it's about 4 million people. And one of the interesting things about it is it's dominated by a company called Dongling Group, which is a former town and village enterprise. So it's actually collectively owned by the city. And this has led to now it's a huge company which actually funds a lot of the social development in the city. So we go to things like primary schools and secondary vocational schools for the students that are not going to go on to university. We go to nursing homes. But we also looked at like farmer specialized cooperatives. It looks at different ways of poverty alleviation in areas. Because Baoji, while it's a city, there's also lots of rural areas there. Now, Baoji, this is the other thing we were able to do in Baoji is the political shadowing. And I think that's probably the most unique deep dive field trip. So this is where our students are able to shadow a local government official for a week. Now, in order to do this, you have to have pretty good Chinese. I mean, we're quite good Chinese in order to do this. But this is something no one else gets to do. No one else gets to have for students to say follow someone, to follow the mayor, or follow the county commissioner, follow the head of the Hydro Bureau, the Water Bureau, or the head of the Agriculture Bureau, or the head of the Development and Reform Commission, Fagaiwei. This is something Chinese graduate students never get to do, much less international students. But this is one of the kind of key secret sauces of the Schwarzman program, access to people that other programs just don't have access to. And I think Baoji has just been a wonderful partner for us these last 5 years, and we're looking forward to going back again. And then the newest form of the deep dive field trip we have is a rural homestay deep dive. And this is, last year we went to Yunnan. Yunnan is one of the poorest provinces of China. It's the most ethnically and culturally and biologically diverse provinces in China. And it's also a place that 10 years ago, only about 40% of the area had roads. So this road was built just before we got there for the first trip. And there's, I think, Carlos sitting there with the villagers. And in that we stayed in a village with villagers for the week, and we visited 3 different villages along the time. One village, the average income per family was about $500. One was about $5,000, and one was probably about $300. And so you're looking at even different levels of economic development, even within 10, 15 kilometers or 8 to 10 miles of each other. And so this is one of the things that we want to build out going forward. And so in terms of our future plans with the deep dive field trips, we want to expand. We want to do more rural field trips. We also want to start doing things to say ethnic minority areas like Dong or Miao Village and Guizhou. And we're trying to add a service learning option. So basically, where students who are interested would be able to spend the entire week doing a field trip, probably in a rural area, in an impoverished area, doing service during their trip. And we also want to add a mini field trip in the spring. So the idea being that every scholar during the year would be able to go to at least 2 different places, and at least one of them would be a rural area or a smaller city, like what we call a 4th or 5th tier city, which is still 400,000 or 500,000 people. But one kind of as a wrap up, I think I may have the best job in the world because my job enables me to just travel around China and see the transformation that's happening here. And I mean, right now I'm in Chongqing, another city that we want to add to the mix. And we've never done a trip here. And Chongqing is one of the most important cities for China's Western development. And as I'm traveling around, I mean, again, I've been in China for over 15 years. I'm still just blown away by the things I see. For example, 2 weeks ago, I was in Hangzhou. Now it was looking at a company called Hailiao. I'd never heard of them before. They control 70% of the world's copper market. And now they're expanding into education. I went to a school they built, a private school, 13,000 students on the campus. and they're going to build another 40 schools in the next, they've already got 40 schools and building another 200 schools in the next 5 years. Or I was down in Guangzhou, another place we're thinking about doing a trip, at a company called Country Garden, Yunnan. And it was a property company. Now they're getting into AI and getting into restaurants that don't have workers, that just it's all automated. And I saw buildings and entire skyscrapers that had been painted by robots. And we saw a demo of buildings, high rises being built completely by robots. That's the things that just still blow me away, even after 15 years here. And so the deep dive field trips are a way for our scholars to be able to see that transformation up close and personal. And ideally, in terms of the companies we visit, every year is different, but our goal is to see those cutting edge companies, to see the most indicative companies, and not just talk to the HR departments, but or the PR departments, but also talk to the vice presidents and the C-suite. And more often than not, we're able to do that through our numerous connections and the support of the larger Tsinghua University community. So with that, Federico, I'll hand it back over.
Thank you so much, Chad. And I just want to follow up before we go. Thank you for this amazing presentation. And I think you say you have the best job in the world, but I don't think there's anybody else who could do this job better than you. It's contagious how your enthusiasm with those trips and finding new places and imagining that your dedication to that. I just want to follow up before moving on to the cream of the crop here of this conversation and invite the alumni to join. But just to ask you a few questions that usually come out to us and the admissions team from prospect students and from many people who are watching us today from many different parts of the world. The first technical question: how do students pick which deep dive travel they want to do or which theme they want to explore? How does that happen, and when in the academic year this usually happens?
So during orientation, we give a brief introduction to the cities we're going to go to that year. And then students basically give us their preferences. And usually we say give top 3 preferences and reasons why they want to go. For example, some years, everyone wants to go to Shenzhen. Or one year we had Shenzhen and Hangzhou. And everyone wanted to go to Shenzhen and Hangzhou. Hangzhou because of Alibaba, Shenzhen because of Tencent and some of the other companies I mentioned. But they have to give a good reason. And so then, because there's, we try to keep the spaces to about 20, the groups to about 20, because outside of that, it gets hard to manage. And also, we want our scholars to be able to have good conversations, discussions with the leaders of these companies. And so when you get beyond 20 in a group, it just becomes more difficult. Also, I think a lot of times scholars don't know how fascinating some of the other places are. And so that's where, but yeah, so basically in orientation, we kind of let them know where we're going to be going, what kinds of trips to which areas, which cities, and then they give us their preferences.
Thank you, Chuck. Another question that is probably on our top 3 of most frequently asked questions is, of course, Schwarzman Scholars admits and welcomes scholars with previous experience in China and people who have never been to China before, who don't speak Mandarin, and obviously have very different levels of familiarity with the culture, with the geography, with everything. So, and one question we get is, do people with various levels of experience with China are able to experience the deep dive from the experience you've had over the past 5 years? Are people who have absolutely no previous experience in China able to take advantage as much as people who are, native scholars from China, or people who have previous experience in the country?
Oh, absolutely. In some ways, I think the scholars who have less experience in China actually get more from the deep dive experience. So don't forget, we always have at least one faculty member who joins on the trip, and the faculty member is there to help contextualize things, to lead discussions about what they're seeing during the day. But it's actually nice to have this mix of Chinese scholars and scholars with more China background, along with scholars who don't, because also there's a lot of sharing that goes on, in terms of those discussions at night. There's also discussions just on the bus, in between visits. And along with our faculty, we also have 2 to 3 staff on each of the trips. You have to remember our staff, all of our staff, almost all of them have masters from top universities around the world and are also very knowledgeable about China themselves, both our Chinese staff and international staff. And so they're also there to help contextualize. And so this is, one of the magic of Schwarzman Scholars is that it is a year filled with discussion. It's a year filled with reflection, and it's a year filled with feedback to each other about what we're seeing. And that's why I love deep dive, right? It's because I get to go, I'm like, oh, I'm scouting with a faculty member, and he says, oh, do you see that? That's because of A, B, and C. Did you see how that official just talked to you? Or what they said, how they were respectful to you? This is because of, a C, D, and F. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. And because the thing is, there is no China expert now. China is so big, it's so complex that we're all just specialists and we're doing the best we can. But it's that through that discussion that we're all learning things. And I know for me personally, I'm Chiling Ho. I'm in my 40s now, so I had to get to learn a lot about Chinese youth culture, for example, from our scholars. Because and it's just so when we're going to Chongqing, we look at the rap scene in Chongqing or Chengdu. That's something I don't know very much about, for example, but we get to learn about through each other. So yeah, absolutely. I think students get a lot out of the deep dive, even if they don't have much China background. Absolutely.
No, thank you so much, Chad. I'll turn over to the alumni now, and please feel free to interject and ask your questions. I mean, you've been to some of the deep dives that, to all of the deep dives I get that people here went. And I want to start with Feng Di. Hello, can you hear us well, Feng Di? No, good?
Very well.
Good. So if you could start just by saying, which cohort you are, where you're from, where you are right now, your interest, and if you could spend, a minute or so talking about your deep dive experience.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you, Federico, for organizing this, and sorry about the technical issues. I'm third cohort, and I'm from China, currently based in Beijing. I'm actually from Shenzhen, and that's the reason I didn't sign up for the Shenzhen deep dive. Like, how deep can you really go, like, from a Shenzhen person? But the deep that I did end up going is the one in Hangzhou. Hangzhou was also a very popular city my year because everyone wanted to see what Alibaba was doing, and I was very curious about the things that are happening tech-wise in Hangzhou as well. So I'll give you a very brief overview of what really impressed me when I decided to sign up for Hangzhou. So I think there was a contrast between it's such a southern water town, and I've only remember Hangzhou as somewhere that is very, that has a lot of cultural influences, not so much, I've never really witnessed the development of Hangzhou in terms of tech. And we get to visit the robotics, a series of robotics companies that really showcased how automated all of the industries are. So for example, if you go to a store, it is completely unmanned, and you basically interact with very well-designed robots to basically get the service that you want. And then there are also like multiple other robots that was really mind-blowing. There was a factory of robots that we just basically went into, and then there were robots that were dancing with the music. But anyways, that aside, so there was a contrast between, okay, famously known as some southern water town that has a lot of culture and produce great tea. And then you also get to see, okay, there's definitely a lot of like heavy industries that's going on in the city as well, which was very eye-opening for not only the non-Chinese scholars, but the Chinese scholars as well. I don't even know there's such a robotics town in Hangzhou at all. And in the meantime, Hangzhou is also very known for being the like traditional manufacturing base back in the days. Like in the 80s, Jiangzhou, that whole area was known for, being the production center for the entire China. So we went to visit a factory, and my impression of a factory would be, okay, here's the prototype, and you have this idea, and then you produce it and store it in a warehouse. What really blew my mind was the factory that we went to was a factory that produces kitchen related hardwares, and the warehouse was a parking lot sized warehouse. It was so large that you cannot possibly see how big it is, and it was complete. And there was so much automation that goes on in it. You can hear the sound of like moving hands, moving mechanical hands in it, grabbing the right boxes, but there's no way that you can see exactly like what was going on. And then the size of it, and also how efficiency that it was operating. I remember like just 20 of us standing in front of that warehouse and just awing at, oh my God, how does this actually work? And this technology has actually been implemented by not only them, but also being widely used by Jingdong and Alibaba, all the other major exporters of China. So it was definitely mind-blowing to see on your own. And what also sort of really left a very deep impression on me was we went to the city municipal of Hangzhou, and because Alibaba was also like sort of cooperated very heavily with with the municipal office, we get to see how fast things are being processed. When you go in, instead of a person, there will be a machine that assists you, and then all the way from starting the process till the process ends, it only takes a very short amount of time. Instead of like, I'm sure you have those memories of going to the DMVs and waiting for a long line until someone just. It was, first of all, it was a very big building, and then everything was very nice, orderly, and then there's no visible line that I can see, and like information being put in places where like people can actually go to find help. So I thought that was a very thoughtful thing that the government is like merged with technology. So with that, I think the clear topic for going to Hangzhou for me was to be able to see how tech has changed people's lives, and how tech was really everywhere in that city. And it was, we got to have conversations with people coming from different cities. And I talked to someone who was coming from Shenzhen, even though it was both in tech, completely two different sort of narratives going on with the city of Hangzhou and the city of Shenzhen. And all of us get to have a very good experience just spending time together. Besides all the manufacturing, the factory visits and the company visits, we also got to spend time in a city to see, okay, like China is very big, we all know that, but how does it really differ? Like how do people interact with each other? What's the way that they talk? What things do they eat? So it was I think one trip of a week was better than reading 1,000 books about Hangzhou. And it was very interesting to hear some scholars' comments and questions about Hangzhou as well. For example, Hangzhou used a very different dialect. Our scholars really learned the Chinese, but was not able to understand a lot of Chinese in Hangzhou. Yeah, it was overall, I would say the experience with a small group was very effective in understanding like a particular city in Hangzhou. And I really hoped that we were able to like visit like maybe more than one city during our stay in Schwarzman. So, all right, with that.
Excellent. Oh my God, that's great. It's good to see that the enthusiasm is not only with Chad, it keeps going, keeps growing. I just wanted to follow up from one aspect that, of course, I didn't do a deep dive. I'm still waiting for the invitation. But one thing that I really appreciate is this ethnographic or almost, the experiential part of it, and the experiential learning component of it. I wanted to follow up because your background, Pandi, is on, international security. You came into Schwarzman Scholars after completing a master's in non-proliferation studies and terrorism studies. And what you explained that you didn't want to go to Chengdu because you're from there. So that was one reason for choosing a different one. But I wanted to ask you about insights into your area, right? You're visiting factories, and you're, things that you're basically, this deep dive forced you or inspire you to get out of your zone of comfort academically. So I just wanted you to tell us about, particular insights that you got from this deep dive experience.
So the primary reason that I wanted to sign up for Hangzhou is for me, since I've made it back to China, really one of the biggest industry that I wanted to see changes, and also you're feeling changes, is tech. But you're only able to see tech on a very macro level, not granular enough that that, okay, what is the advancement that is happening around us. You may read about that in the newspaper, but you don't know really it means for, you know, improving life and changing the small things in your life. And coming from a very IR related background, I think I needed like a more granular touch to the society, like what's something that brings me back. And also, so funny thing here, I made a pivot from IR to tech after the year of Schwarzman. So I guess maybe the Hangzhou trip also helped me into understanding more sort of more path and more specific small areas that was happening in tech. China has been, so I'll give you an example. China is a very big exporter, and even so today, and some of the biggest exporters in China are like Jingdong and Alibaba, and they're and also like most of the manufacturers there are, if you aggregate all of them, that also accounts to a very large number for the things that they're exporting from China. Definitely IR related, international security related, but then it's an industry that is so up and coming, that is growing so fast that you really have to put your eye on it. So I decided to see something that I've never seen before, and it was really absolutely mind blown.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe it's already, you know, over half hour has passed already in this webinar. We could stay here forever. Willie, welcome. You're next in line. If you could greet us with your quick introduction, you know, which cohort you are, where you're speaking to us from, and if you could just share a little bit about your deep dive experience, which was significantly different than Fang Di's.
Yeah, for sure. What's up, everybody? My name is Willie Thompson. Also a member of the great third cohort, as Pan was also a member of. I'm speaking to you all from a small town called Griffin, Georgia, about 20,000 people, very small, even by China standards. And I'm currently working in consulting at the Bridgebane Group, and I'm happy to talk to you all a bit about why I chose to go on a deep dive to Xiong'an. So for me, I think there were a couple of reasons why I wanted to go to Xiong'an. One was education. I sort of, I applied to Schwarzman, talking about the importance of intercultural education and wanting to learn sort of like the different ways in which countries use education as a means of of teaching culture and like what you can learn from that. I also had experience teaching in Taiwan, so I just realized like that was something I really wanted to learn more about. And Xiong'an was the only one that had like any education related to it, and so that was a big reason why. And even on the trip, I think we visited at least 3 schools, and so it was really cool to see how the schools were really like preserving culture in a lot of ways, right? I think when it comes to like my personal background, I'm someone who really believes in the importance of like the arts, and sort of every school we went to had like some emphasis on that in some way, shape, or form, and we got a chance to participate with students in some of the cultural and arts related activities they had at the schools, and we also just got to learn a bit about what their lives are like. And I think that is just something that you really don't get a chance, like you can read about it all you want to, but until you sort of like have lunch and get to learn about like what students are going through and how they're learning, it's just a unique experience. The second is economic, actually. So not to go too deep down an economic history rabbit hole, but Shenzhen and places like Pudong are like really important because those are like areas that were economic zones when Deng Xiaoping was running the show in China. And I think there was like when you think about Xi Jinping and like his legacy, like Xiong'an is one of those areas where it's like it's a new economic zone, right? It's basically people think about like the big cities like Shanghai and Beijing. I think Xiong'an is like a piece of like this larger like economic sort of development that's going on between Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei, otherwise known, I think, is Jingji. And so like I'd read a little bit about that, was like really interested in like what does it mean to like create like a totally new economic zone and use that as like the basis upon which like you actually like play around with like different like policies and like think about improving people's economic welfare. And so as someone who studied economics in college, I was like, this is like a really cool opportunity to get to see like this up front as it's sort of being built, because I think Shongan wasn't like, it was sort of like in the planning phases of sort of like all the ideas and the policies are getting implemented. And so, we got a chance to see like a smart city and like see sort of like where they are today and where they want to go in the future with like, like I think it was like streets that charge electric cars as they were driving down them, right? Like, like really crazy, cool ideas. And I think just being able to like see that, not just like in sort of like this innovative way, but also see that in terms of like the economic development of villages. We also got a chance to visit a place called Taiyuanzhong Village, which is, small village that like, basically like everyone who's a resident there like has their like rent and like their utilities and like their food paid for based on like the real estate market and like how and people who are tourists or people who come to the area to work, like. And so it's a really cool like economic model to think about, like, oh, what would it look like for people in a community to like not have to worry about like their daily needs. And so I think that has relevance and implications for places like the US too, right? So I think that, education was a big reason, economics is another really big reason. And probably entertainment. I mean, we had a lot of fun in Shanghai. It wasn't like a really long plane ride away from Beijing. We just took the high speed rail, and we even got a chance to go to like the ping pong academy where like they train, the next generation of Olympians. And I don't play ping pong. I'm much more of a badminton basketball kind of dude. But it's safe to say nobody who challenged any of the students in ping pong won. It was a pretty one-sided and lopsided affair. So those are the reasons I chose Shongan, and I think it was really nice because I think similar sort of like thinking about Chad and what Pam were talking about earlier, right? Like a lot of people will like say, I really want to go to like this one place, and like, if they don't go to Hangzhou, they get like their second or third option, and like, I guess like make the best of it. But because Shongan was like the thing, like you kind of had to like want to go there in a way. Like everybody was there, like wanted to be there for like for a number of like very like real and authentic reasons, and I think that just created like the lived experience for the group there. And also had a really great professor who joined us, Monk, who's like a really great guy, and was able to just like give a little bit of the cultural nuances there. But I definitely went over a minute, so sorry about that.
No, thank you.
I just get excited thinking about
Thank
that experience.
I want to follow up with one question and before we pass to Carlos and Shubin, but the region is not only the cradle of gold medalist ping pong players. It's also where Hebei especially is where it's known for being the place you mentioned, President Xi, and the place where he kind of started his political rise in China. And if you could comment a little bit about that, and particularly you, Willie, because quite interesting, not only your interest in education, but the things you studied at the college and being kind of an aggregator figure in the cohort, and also study, the meaning of heroism among Chinese students. How did you relate to that, or did that, being this special region for China, but also for the current leadership of China, kind of having the symbolism, did that influence your decision to do this deep dive?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, so I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't bring it. I didn't bring it up the first time when I mentioned, Shuzhaozhuang or Shongan. So the craziest thing is like, Xi Jinping actually like started his like political career there. Like he served, I think, as deputy secretary and secretary of Zhending County, I think like in like the early 80s, and then he like basically continued to visit like between then and like 2013. It's like it's like a very special place, and like I think like you can feel that connection when you go there, and people, there are pictures of him visiting like all over the place. I think like in Taiyuanzhong village there was like a panorama of like all the times he's come to visit, and so you can just sort of see his connection to the place, which I think is it's just like different compared to like what happens in the US. And so I thought that was like really cool. I think when it comes to like education, so I did so as Federico mentioned, I did my internship at an elementary school at Tsinghua, and I also like wrote my capstone on like what kids in China thought about heroism. And I do think that For me, a lot of it was just like trying to have an opportunity to just like meet like the next generation of people who are going to be leading or like contributing to China's prominence in the world, right? And so I think for me it was being able to like sit down with them and just like hear what they had to think. I think in a lot of ways, I don't think we ask children enough like what they think and like how they think about the world, because I think it can just teach us a lot. And I think my capstone, sort of just talking to the kids about heroism, also like illuminated a lot as well, and really just showed like a number of similarities between my experience in the U.S. and their experiences in China in terms of who they emulate and who they think are their heroes. So yeah, I think Zhongyang definitely played a role in my decision to continue to pursue like education as an option for my capstone, and then just like for the other work I did when I returned to Beijing, because it's sort of it is like a common denominator for everyone that I meet. Where'd you go to school, where do you go to college, all these other types of things. So for sure, it was definitely a driver.
Thank you. No, thank you so much, Willie. I want to pass the word to Carlos and invite you, Carlos, to tell us who you are, where you are, representing the 4th cohort, Texas and Puerto Rico in the house. So please tell us a little bit about you and your deep dive experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Federico. It's really a pleasure to be here, and great to hear about everyone's deep dive experiences. My name is Carlos. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. And like Federico said, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So got a little best of both worlds there. And I came to China with 0 in-country experience, 0 language experience. And I found that the deep dive experience that I had in Yunnan was really, truly a life-changing moment. I got to go with Chad on the trip, so that was also very memorable. But I think what was so special about this is that before, my background is in international relations, global security policy, and so I had always looked at China as this kind of united entity that decisions come down from the central government and are implemented across the country. And I just found being able to experience and visit a rural village in Yunnan, it gave me a lot more appreciation of how varied governance styles are across the entire country. And that was a really special experience. We stayed with a family of tea farmers, and it was a really small group, I think 12 of us in total. And we were grouped up in pairs, got to spend the week just shadowing our family. And I was paired with a native speaker so that I could understand a little bit more of the interactions. Otherwise, I would have been a little bit more lost. But that was really exciting just to hear about, what is it that is happening? What are the changes that are happening in rural China? The farmers that we had stayed with, for most of their lives, they had relied on corn farming and agriculture in that way. And then in recent years, I think within the last 5 years, they started switching and becoming involved with the tea industry. And now their whole they were basically made a living off of farming tea, picking tea leaves, selling it. And then we got a really unique understanding of, how tea goes from being, picked in the field all the way to being processed. And it was a really unique experience. The village that we were in had 300 people, so about 50 families. And they welcomed us with open arms. We'd have communal dinners in the town square when we arrived, and then people would just like come by our table and like kind of take us to their homes and give us more tea while we were discussing. And it was just really incredible experiences about seeing. Of course, China is a country where you have cities of 10 million people with really high-tech infrastructure, but at the same time, 40% of China lives in rural areas, lives in places like these where people may not they may not be fully literate, but they so when they were like communicating with each other, they'd send voice notes to each other on WeChat. So it was just like really fascinating to see how technology has come into the rural areas, as well as the impact of infrastructure and road development on bringing more economic opportunities into these areas. So really amazing. Can't speak highly enough of it because it really just gives you a different perspective.
Thank you, Carlos. want to follow it out. Of course, I want to save some time and be cognizant of time. And people, please keep sending us your questions. But I want to follow up with you, Carlos, with one question about not only you were one of the example. You're an example of what we were talking earlier about international scholars or scholars who have no previous or relevant experience in China. But also, I think one interesting thing is that when people talk about our program, it's a program of global affairs. We naturally attract people like you who come from a background of international relations, working with non-proliferation issues and associated with the UN. We usually think about associate Schwarzman scholars with big global and international challenges, and yet your experience in Yunnan, this is one of the most complex and most rural, most diverse regions and unknown regions in China. And I think during this deep dive experience, you were very much connected, that's my impression at least, with very local issues, right? So what are the insights you get from this? This is a program on global affairs, and how much global is local and local is global too.
Oh, I love that. I love that. No, it's true. And like you mentioned, I was really focused on non-proliferation is my area before coming in. And so when I had that opportunity to step outside my comfort zone, understand a little bit about, well, what are some of these issues that I don't think about when I think about China, because I think about it from this kind of international relations perspective. What are the issues that affect local Chinese families on the ground? One of the big ones that happened was in our village, there was a big, China had this poverty alleviation campaign, but it was really remarkable to sit down with some of these families and understand, well, we've heard about this happening. How has it affected you? And they would tell us, well, we got a direct cash deposit into our bank account of this much, of this many yuan, and this is how we spent it. We used to live in a house built out of wood with asbestos roofing, and now we have this new kind of prefab home that has been built, has more concrete based, and we started living in this last year. That was the kind of response that we got from the people that we met. And those are conversations that you really would be hard pressed to have anywhere else, where someone walks you through and tells you, well, this is how this policy has affected me, and it really just gives me a whole nother level of understanding about China, not just as a large entity, but on this smaller regional level. So that's why I loved it so much. And we drank a lot of tea.
Thank you. All right, Shubi, I want to pass the word to you. Sorry that you're the best for last. I mean, if I got to choose, I would I think I'm not allowed to say what is the best of the deep dives, and especially me who didn't do any. But I think when people talk about Baoji and the experience of political shadowing, so if you could tell us a little bit about that experience and where you are and where you're from.
Yes, well, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with everyone. So I'm Chubin Li. I come from Shanghai, China. I'm right now based in Beijing. So my interest currently is at renewable energy and sustainable development. I will probably go to California if I can get a visa. So fingers crossed for that. Well, I went to Baoji for deep dive. I hope you guys don't get too jealous. So I went to the political shadowing part because I speak pretty good Chinese. The reason why I choose that is because I choose a place I've never heard of, and I probably would never have gone on my own. So that's how unique the exposure is. And then, as Chad has introduced before, by saying shadowing, we mean we literally just follow this person or this group of people for 1 week. Yeah, I hope we don't drive them crazy, but you can't even really randomly follow a person on the street, let alone somebody, for example, as high level as the head of organizational department. So for China, the head of the organizational department is responsible for personnel. Basically, he or she gets to decide who can be the leader or something. It's a very central role. So one theme we have for this political shadowing is poverty alleviation, as it's one of the 3 tough battles China has. And also this year we have, eradicated extreme poverty, which is something really miraculous. So one thing I've really appreciated is it contextualized some of the really abstract ideas that we've come across in classes or somewhere else. For example, the China's merit-based cadre system. I don't even know the word of cadre before, but when I go there, I see how people are getting organized, how the political system is organized on the ground, and more importantly is that I get to see how things are carried on the ground. How it takes more than policy for policies to work. We get to see what's happening behind the scenes, how things are done, how trust are built, especially on dinner table. So that's something that's truly fascinating. And also, it is also a very humbling experience. So I am a Chinese, but I'm never, competent enough to say, okay, I'm a Chinese expert or I know China enough. Because for a country as large as China, it has so many different dimensions. We not only have Chad who know more about Chinese history than you do, who speak better Chinese than you do, we also get to see so many different dimensions. I grew up in Shanghai, and I went to Beijing for undergraduate and graduate. I've never been to a third tier or fourth tier city. Well, Beijing is probably the fifth tier city. So you get to see a lot of the developmental problems can only be solved by development. You don't question why they don't select a person with a college degree or something. They don't have people there in a very, very small town. And instead, the leader, the person we follow or shadow, he really acts like a mentor, provide advice right away, and then guide them, while at the same time criticize some of their behaviors. It's like a fatherly go. So yeah, I'll probably stop here because I want to see what do you guys want to know. So if you have any questions, me and others were more than happy to answer them.
Right, no, that's brilliant, Shumi. Yeah, we are coming incredibly to the end of the hour, but if you guys have any other questions, I do want to follow up with Shumi, but meanwhile, if you have questions, please use the Q&A box to send your questions. I put in the chat box some additional resource information for those of you who want to follow up. Please, I'm not difficult to find. If you have questions about the application process that is currently open for both Chinese nationals and people from all over the world, feel free to send it my way. The information is all there. I want to, invite everybody to speak, but I have one. I just wanted to follow up, because I never really asked that especially to a Chinese scholar, which is about the level of exposure. And if you could give us a little bit more nuance, an idea of the level of exposure that you had, you being a Chinese, graduated, and you born and raised in China, graduated from the second best university in China. And I think, one thing that I get impressed is, the level of exposure and the level of connection that you get during the deep dive experience is something really unique, and that you don't really find that easily in other programs, be it graduate or undergraduate programs. So if you could just comment a little bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. So as I've mentioned, this really is a once in a lifetime experience. It gives you great exposure. It provides an access to peek into how policies are executed and how decisions are made. And more importantly, you're not going there alone. You're going there with other fellow scholars, coming with all kinds of backgrounds, coming with all kinds of nationalities. So you're not only learning about China, you're learning about China from a comparative perspective. So when you observe something, you have conversations with other people, and you get to know how things are done elsewhere and in alternative ways. And then you get more sense of what are the relative advantage or disadvantage of this. Politics, a lot of people come into China with great curiosity and interest to learn about China's political system. It's as mysterious, as difficult to understand. So this comparative perspective is really great. And I really can't think of any better way to learn about China. It's, a lot of our experiences with any countries is limited in academia. So, get to know a country, get to know a place by touching it, by talking to people from there, by tasting that, they have great food. And more importantly, do that with your fellow scholars. It's fantastic experience. So we love it so much that we refer any self-organized trip as deep dive. So I'm currently on the Chengdu deep dive. So for any trip that's informative, inspiring, and interesting, we call that a deep dive. So you can see how much we love it and how much it has shaped our experience at Schwarzman College.
Thank you so much, Shuveen. I want to, there's one question more for you, and it's about what did you learn about the ecological civilizations and renewable energy implementations throughout the program? If that has, I think with that we'll close, and then I'll go on for a round of final remarks. Shuveen.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is about mentality. I have a literature background. So I know you can find any kind of resources you have at Schwarzman if you take the initiative. So I have an open mind, and I'm open to explore any specializations, anything. And just as Fandi said, I've discovered my interest here at Schwarzman College because I've realized the importance. It's an existential crisis of climate change and everything. And I get to know people who are experts in this area. I got to intern with British Petroleum, with their Beijing office. So with both the theories you can learn and also the hands-on experience you have, that's what, and made me determine this is something I'm gonna do in the near future or probably for a lifetime. Yeah, so it's wonderful experience, and I'm excited for more.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, this hour just flew by. I can't believe we're coming to the end of this webinar. But Chad, if you have any final remarks,
I'll just say that this session has really just reminded me yet again that the real secret sauce of the Schwarzman Scholars program is the students, the scholars and the alumni and the community, in terms of learning about China, but also learning about the world. And just, just such an amazing group of people that we've been able to attract over the last 5 years. And so just to be a part of this community is just such a gift to me. So thank you to everyone who joined today, and it's so good to see all of you again.
Thank you. All right. Well, and with this, I think we finalized. This is being recorded, so it will be available hopefully soon for everybody. But thank you so much for everyone who participated and who joined us, and to you, the 4 alumni who were here with us today. I mean, no words to thank you enough. And yeah, please contact us, and thank you so much, everybody. See you another time. Bye.